From the moment you open your eyes in the morning to the moment you collapse into bed at night, every reaction, every attraction, every fear, every craving, every coincidence, and every so-called random moment in your life is being shaped by psychological forces you cannot see but constantly feel. And what you are about to discover in the next 15 seconds will make you question every decision you've ever made. Because the truth is disturbingly simple. Nothing you do is accidental. Nothing you want is spontaneous. And nothing you feel happens without a hidden psychological blueprint silently guiding your life behind your back. The people you are drawn to, the opportunities you ignore, the mistakes you repeat, the patterns you keep returning to, the emotions that trigger you instantly, and even the timing of certain events are not random at all, but deeply connected to your past, your subconscious associations, your unresolved memories, and the invisible mental programming your brain downloaded years before you even realized it was happening. Meaning your life is not a series of coincidences, but a psychological pattern expressing itself again and again through different faces, different moments, and different choices. Every time you meet someone and feel an instant connection or instant discomfort, it isn't intuition, it's recognition, because your nervous system is comparing their voice, energy, posture, tone, or emotional expression to someone from your past, causing your brain to whisper safe or danger, long before your conscious mind has even finished saying, nice to meet you. And this is why some people feel familiar, even though you've never met them, and why others make your chest tighten, even though they've done nothing wrong. The goals you chase are not chosen freely, but shaped by psychological rewards. Your brain learned to associate with approval, love, and identity. So if you grew up praised for being smart, you chase achievements. If you were admired for being strong, you chase toughness. If you were valued for being quiet, you chase invisibility. And if you were rewarded for being useful, you chase people you can save. Meaning, what you call dreams may actually be emotional survival strategies rooted in the version of you the world once rewarded. Even your random emotional reactions aren't random at all, because your brain stores emotional memories like landmines that can be triggered by the smallest detail. A tone of voice, a facial expression, a sudden silence, a misunderstanding, or even the energy of a room. And this is why you sometimes overreact to something minor, or fall apart over something small. Not because you're weak, but because the moment touched an old emotional wound you didn't realize was still bleeding underneath the surface. When you lose someone, and someone new enters your life soon after, it's not the universe replacing them randomly. It's your brain searching for emotional equilibrium, trying to restore the psychological pattern it's accustomed to, because the mind is addicted to familiarity, even painful familiarity, which is why people who grew up around chaos often feel bored in peace, and why people who grew up around abandonment unconsciously expect it in every relationship they enter. You think you choose the places you go, but your environment reflects your psychology more than your preferences. Because people who crave safety avoid crowds. People who crave validation go where they can be seen. People who crave control choose predictable routines. And people who fear their own thoughts surround themselves with noise. Meaning your favorite locations reveal your fears more accurately than your words ever could. The timing of events in your life is also not as accidental as you think, because your brain is constantly scanning for patterns and meaning. And what looks like coincidence is often your subconscious creating opportunities, noticing signals, or interpreting situations in a way that aligns with your internal narrative. Which is why certain opportunities only show up after you emotionally outgrow something, and why certain people appear exactly when you're ready to see something you've been avoiding for years. When someone triggers you deeply, It's not because of what they said, but because of what your brain connected their words to. And this is why two people can hear the same comment, but only one reacts intensely. The reaction is never about the present moment, but about the emotional memory attached to the moment, proving that triggers are not signs of weakness, but signs of unresolved psychological patterns demanding your attention. Even your motivation isn't random. It spikes and dies according to emotional associations you built years ago, which is why some tasks feel impossible, even though they're simple, and others feel exciting, even when they're difficult. Because the brain does not care about logic, difficulty, or importance. It only cares about emotional meaning, comfort, and survival, making motivation less about discipline and more about psychological wiring. The habits you can't break are not due to lack of willpower, but because your brain uses habits as psychological shortcuts, storing them in the subconscious to reduce effort. Meaning every habit is a mental automation created to make your emotional environment predictable, which is why breaking a habit feels like ripping a thread out of your identity, not just changing a behavior. The relationships you choose also follow a pattern that has nothing to do with luck or chance, because your brain is constantly gravitating toward people who reflect the emotional expectations you learned early in life. So if love once felt like inconsistency, you will seek inconsistency. If love felt like fear, you will confuse intensity with connection. If love felt unstable, you will mistake unpredictability for chemistry, proving that attraction is not random, but the subconscious trying to recreate what it once considered familiar. Your failures are not random either, because the self-sabotage you experience is deeply rooted in beliefs you formed about yourself long before you understood their meaning. Beliefs about worthiness, capacity, potential, and identity. And until those beliefs change, the pattern repeats itself like a psychological loop that keeps placing you in the same situations with different faces, hoping you finally learn what you once ignored. Even your intuition is not some mystical force, but a psychological pattern recognition system that detects micro details your conscious mind overlooks. Meaning when you get a gut feeling, it often comes from years of accumulated memories, emotional associations, and subconscious observations boiling to the surface as a sudden warning or insight, making intuition far more scientific than people realize. And when you think about all these invisible forces shaping your life, you begin to realize the unsettling truth that your story isn't written by randomness, but by patterns. Patterns created by your upbringing, your emotions, your fears, your trauma, your conditioning, your memories, and the meanings you've attached to every experience you've lived through up to this very moment. And once you understand that nothing is random, you begin to understand why certain moments repeat, why certain people reappear, why certain fears never leave, and why your life seems to follow a theme you never consciously chose, but have been unconsciously repeating for years. When you finally start paying attention to the patterns instead of the moments, you begin to notice something unsettling. The same themes keep showing up in different areas of your life like a psychological echo, repeating themselves through new people, new environments, and new experiences. Not because the world is against you or because you are cursed, but because your subconscious is trying to resolve emotional loops it never got the chance to complete, meaning life will keep giving you the same lesson, disguised in different forms, until you finally understand what the earlier version of you couldn't. You start realizing that the people who enter your life aren't random at all, but reflections of the parts of yourself you haven't mastered yet, which is why you attract people who mirror your wounds, expose your insecurities, trigger your unresolved fears, or amplify your strengths. Because every relationship, good or bad, is emotionally coded to teach you something, reveal something, or break something open inside you that your conscious mind has been avoiding. And the uncanny part is that the ones who hurt you the most are often the ones whose presence contains the exact psychological message you needed the most, but understood the least. As you look closer, you notice that even your heartbreaks follow patterns, repeating the same emotional script with different names and different faces. Because heartbreak is not just about losing a person, but about repeating a familiar emotional wound your brain has been carrying for years, which is why the pain feels deeper than the situation deserves, because the heartbreak you feel today is connected to every unresolved goodbye you never healed from, echoing through your nervous system like a trauma that keeps replaying until you finally break the internal cycle instead of the external connection. The choices you keep making also reveal their own patterns, because you think you're choosing freely, but you're actually choosing predictably according to invisible psychological rules you've internalized over time. Rules about what kind of love you believe you deserve, what kind of risks you think you're capable of taking, what kind of future you think you're allowed to have, and what kind of happiness you think you're worthy of, making your life less like a series of spontaneous decisions and more like a script written by beliefs that have been silently directing you from the shadows. Even your mistakes repeat themselves because each mistake is like a message coded in behavior, telling you that something within you remains unresolved, unexamined, or unhealed. And until you decode that message, your subconscious keeps recreating situations that force you to confront the emotional truth you keep suppressing, which is why you lose the same opportunities in different ways. Trust the same personality type, wearing a different face. Sabotage yourself in creative new forms, or keep ending up in situations that mirror the very thing you claim you want to escape. You eventually begin noticing that your fears aren't random either, because every fear you have today was created in a moment where your emotional safety was threatened, whether physically, socially, or psychologically. And even though the danger is no longer present, your brain stored that fear as a permanent warning, replaying it in similar situations whether the threat is real or imagined, which is why you fear rejection even when no one is rejecting you, failure even when you're talented enough to succeed, abandonment even when someone is trying to stay, and vulnerability even when you're safe. The opportunities you attract or fail to attract also reveal patterns you didn't notice before, because opportunities align themselves with your psychological readiness, not your desires, meaning you only receive what you believe you're equipped to handle. And when you're emotionally unprepared, you either overlook the opportunity, sabotage it, or misinterpret it as a threat, proving that what shows up in your life is never random, but always a reflection of your internal emotional state and the level of self-trust you currently possess. Even timing is not random, because events in your life unfold according to psychological thresholds, appearing exactly when the emotional version of you is ready or forced to make a shift. And this is why certain breakthroughs only happen after breakdowns. Certain people appear after endings. Certain dreams awaken after disappointments. And certain parts of yourself only reveal themselves after you lose something you thought you couldn't live without, making timing feel magical, but actually being deeply psychological, guided by emotional pressure that eventually forces transformation. You begin to see that your intuition is not vague or mystical, but a pattern recognition system trained by every experience you've ever had, working silently in the background to warn you, guide you, or push you forward based on hidden emotional data you don't consciously notice. Which is why your intuition feels like a whisper at first and a scream when ignored, because it is not random instinct, but accumulated psychological wisdom, trying to prevent you from repeating a pattern you've already lived through before. The dreams you keep having, even the strange ones, are not random, either because your subconscious uses dreams as emotional simulations to help you process what your conscious mind refuses to confront, which is why you dream about being chased when you're avoiding a decision. Dream about falling when you feel out of control. Dream about losing someone when you fear abandonment. And dream about places from your past when your brain needs to revisit a wound. It never fully healed, proving that your dreams are psychological messages disguised in symbolic form. Even the people you lose aren't random, because loss often functions as a psychological pivot, shifting you into a version of yourself you never would have become if they had stayed. Meaning their absence creates emotional space for growth, clarity, strength, independence, or self-discovery that their presence would have prevented. And as painful as it feels, the disappearance of certain people is part of the pattern of shaping the emotional version of you that your future requires. You eventually notice that even your successes follow a pattern, appearing when you align your internal beliefs with your external actions. Because success isn't about luck or randomness, but about psychological alignment. Meaning when your self-belief rises, your behavior changes. Your decisions become bolder, your opportunities expand, and your path becomes clearer, revealing that success is less about talent and more about shifting the internal story you tell yourself about what you are capable of. Your emotional triggers aren't random either, because every time you explode, shut down, pull away, or panic, your brain is not reacting to the moment, but to the memory the moment resembles, meaning your present reactions are often echoes of past pain disguised as current emotions. And until you recognize this, you continue treating new people like old wounds and new experiences like old threats, repeating emotional patterns that you're convinced are coincidence, but are actually deeply coded psychological reflexes. And once you begin to understand all of this, a strange realization hits you. Your entire life, from your relationships to your successes, to your failures, to your fears, to your cravings, to your dreams, is following a psychological architecture built long before you became aware of it. And the moment you see this, the illusion of randomness dissolves, revealing that your life has never been chaotic, never been directionless, never been accidental, but has always been guided by patterns, meanings, and emotional truths that have been quietly shaping your path from the beginning. And as you begin to understand that your life is not a collection of disconnected events, but a psychological ecosystem shaped by patterns, triggers, and internal laws you were never taught to recognize, something else becomes clear to you. Nothing you attract, nothing you fear, nothing you repeat, and nothing you chase is accidental. Because the subconscious mind is a blueprint that organizes your entire existence long before the conscious mind notices what is happening. And the moment you finally see this mechanism is the moment your life stops feeling like chaos and starts becoming something you can deliberately design. And while you may think that your preferences, your taste in people, your reaction to criticism, your resistance to change, your impulsive decisions, your procrastination, your trust issues, your motivation level, are random personal traits, psychology tells us that they are patterned responses created by two forces you rarely think about: conditioning and association. Because the brain does not ask, "Is this good for me?" It asks, "Is this familiar?" And when you suddenly realize that familiarity has been choosing your relationships, your goals, your limits, and your emotional expectations for your entire life, you begin to question how many of your choices were ever truly your own. And one of the most uncomfortable truths you are about to face is that even the people you allow into your life follow a pattern, because the brain is drawn to emotional environments. It recognizes even if those environments hurt you. And this is why so many people repeat the same kind of relationships over and over again, telling themselves, "I just have bad luck." Without realizing, they are subconsciously selecting experiences that match their internal template of what love, trust, or connection is supposed to feel like. And once you understand this, you will never again call it coincidence when you meet someone who activates the same wounds you thought you had outgrown. And when you pay attention to the timing of people entering and leaving your life, you start to see the invisible psychological currents behind every connection. Because the mind will not allow a new emotional reality to stay if the old emotional patterns still dominate your identity, meaning you cannot receive a healthy relationship if your nervous system is still calibrated to survive in toxic ones. And this is also why people often push away what is good for them and cling to what is destroying them, not because they want pain, but because the brain confuses emotional predictability with emotional safety. And the same law applies to your opportunities, because the reasons certain chances never last, certain dreams never take off, or certain improvements never become consistent, is not because you lack potential, but because your subconscious identity does not agree with the version of yourself required to maintain that new reality. And psychology shows that identity always wins over intention. So if you want your life to stop repeating the same loops, you must change the identity blueprint that is selecting your behaviors, attracting your circumstances, and generating the outcomes you keep calling fate. And this explains why you continue to feel pulled towards certain habits or stuck in certain cycles, because your brain is wired to conserve energy, avoid uncertainty, and protect you from emotional vulnerability, even if that vulnerability is required for growth. And this is why change feels painful, even when staying the same is destroying you, because the brain treats any disruption to your psychological pattern as a threat, meaning your resistance to progress is not laziness or weakness, but a survival instinct that must be consciously overridden. With repetition, rewiring, and emotional exposure to new experiences that teach your subconscious mind that growth does not equal danger. And when you realize that even your fears are patterned, you start noticing that the things you avoid the most are connected to emotional memories buried in your subconscious. Because fear is not random, and it rarely originates from the present moment, but from an earlier environment where you learn to associate certain feelings with harm, judgment, abandonment, or humiliation. And when you finally identify the original emotional event that created the fear itself begins to dissolve, because the brain no longer has a reason to protect you from a threat that no longer exists. And as you continue to explore these layers within yourself, you discover that every emotional reaction you have, anger, jealousy, defensiveness, withdrawal, overthinking, attachment, avoidance, is not random, but a psychological defense that once kept you safe. And this means your reactions are actually emotional artifacts, leftover survival strategies designed for circumstances that no longer match your current life. And once you recognize that these strategies are outdated, you gain the power to replace them with new emotional responses aligned with your present goals instead of your past wounds. And this deeper awareness leads you to an even more powerful insight. The life you are living right now is the physical expression of the beliefs you hold about yourself. And those beliefs were not chosen consciously, but absorbed through repetition, environment, and emotional experiences. Meaning your reality is not shaped by the truth of who you are, but by the psychological narrative you accidentally accepted when you were too young to question it. And when you finally understand this, you stop trying to change your life externally and start rewriting the internal story that has been directing your choices from behind the scenes. And when you shift your internal narrative, the external world begins to change in ways that feel almost supernatural. Not because the universe suddenly becomes magical, but because your mind stops filtering opportunities through fear, stops attracting relationships that reinforce your wounds, stops sabotaging progress that contradicts your identity, and stops repeating cycles that were designed to protect you rather than evolve you. And this is the moment you realize the most incredible truth of all. Your life has never been random. It has always been responding to the level of self-awareness you bring to it. And as you continue to observe these patterns within yourself, you begin to see that nothing in your life happens without a psychological explanation, because the subconscious mind is constantly shaping your behavior, scanning your environment, interpreting signals, selecting people, filtering information, directing your focus, controlling your emotions, and guiding your decisions long before the conscious mind has a chance to intervene. And once you understand this, you no longer blame luck, destiny, or coincidence for your circumstances, because you finally recognize the invisible architecture shaping everything around you. And the most liberating realization comes when you understand that if nothing in your life is random, then everything can be redesigned. Because once you uncover the hidden patterns controlling your reactions, motivations, and emotional impulses, you gain the ability to break cycles that once felt unbreakable, release habits that once felt permanent, attract experiences that once felt impossible, and become a version of yourself that once felt out of reach. And the moment you truly believe this, your entire psychological reality shifts, and so does the life that grows from it. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more practical psychology insights, self-awareness tools, and mind-sharpening advice. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.